Hello guys, this is your friend Naruto Audio Fanfics and we are back with a new fanfic. Which is what if Naruto became Hokage at 18? A night that changed his fate with Anko, Tsunade, Anbu, Tenten Shizune, Tamari and Samui. Part 1. And if you enjoy this fanfic then please press the like button and subscribe to my channel for more fanfic like this. And now let's start the fanfic. Through the windows of the Hokage tower the light of the sun spilled into a small chamber, where Naruto Uzumaki Hokage sat before a long chestnut table. The young Hokage sat in his regular attire except for a cape draped around him with the Hokage symbol sewed in the cloth. Before him a group of men and women, young and old sat the table. All wore dark attire, smoking from pipes and cigarettes resting between their fingers. The smoke filled the room in a matter of seconds. They were the heads of the largest clans of Konoha, all together to speak of current affairs. Naruto listened thoroughly. He sat in a seat much unlike the others, larger than his associates. Behind him stood his assistant Shizune in her kimono and a clipboard in her hand. Against the door two Anbu mounted at hand, both with the only job to keep their Hokage out of harm. Both knew there was no purpose for their presence. With the hero of the world in the room, he was now known across the globe for his fighting against fearsome ninja. At the young age of 18 he became the Hokage and defeated numerous well-known ninja. Although he achieved all he wanted, he found being Hokage was far from what he craved. Behind the various walls he tried to reach it was meetings that consumed every day of his life. The constant sound of a fan in the same room above became pained. Merely a week of being Hokage, he lost count of the meetings and summits. The many men and women spoke to him to death every instance. Once, fighting the utmost powerful ninja, nowadays he sat at a desk. In the room the sun haloed the various men while others were lurking in shadows. Naruto thought it appropriate as many sought peace while others desired war. With the darkness the remaining room was illuminated with sun as it shined on the head of the Inuzuka clan. An old man with a bushy mustache. His brittle muscles didn't halt him trying to become close friends with Naruto and he spoke for a time. Ever since being Hokage he felt eyes on him from some, while others were more inclined to become close friends. And the old man spoke persistently at every turn, more than any person he ever witnessed. The old man standing in the small room, his fragile hands on the table to keep himself. Swallowing his speech he coughed. Once our clan was fierce, nearly as fierce as the Uzumakis in their heyday. We worked together to take what was rightfully ours. Why together we have the makings of an army. No other village stood while we worked together. I see no reason why those days cannot reign again. The old mustached man stated with a quivering smile as he stood. Never was his voice reaching for peace, only he spoke of the days when the Inuzukas were a superior clan. Naruto raised his arm cutting into the Inuzuka speech they all had listened to before. We will not heed a war. I have seen enough conflict. We will keep peace. Naruto declared as he would every day. The old man gazed the room, sitting back down with a grumble. From this statement countless clan heads snorted in response. They didn't see their Hokage, but a young boy with ideas that were nothing but dreams. It seemed behind the very walls Naruto tried to reach for years, men and women worked against one another for power. Always trying to begin a war that once strained the world and all of the villages. The heads of the clans differed, while a particular few kept peace others only famine for more influence, they were adamant of power. But Naruto would damn all of them if they meant to shed blood. After all the blood he felt, he would fight every clan if they meant to begin a war. All the while these men and women spoke Shizune stood near to her Hokage. The sweat on her neck ran hot as unlike any she knew, Naruto kept his fight opposed to the voluminous clans. The heat was apparent in the room, Various clan heads stared at the young Hokage, cracking their knuckles or grimacing, nothing fazing the young hero. She hoped for his sake she would do her job well. The thought of the day Naruto had decided to ask her to be his assistant, she wanted nothing more to stay and help him anyway. Unlike his days as a genin, she found he took the meetings seriously and every day he never halted his numerous duties. Although tonight was different, his party was set for being Hokage a week, and it seemed he was heated in conversation, speaking with these men and women for hours. Leaning forward, her lips close to his ear for only him. Naruto, Tsunade requests to speak with you. She's waiting in your office. With a gentle whisper she spoke and leaned back. Naruto nodded to her. The past Hokage had taught him what he needed for this job and still saw her as a teacher. Even in this heated room he wouldn't leave her waiting and stood briskly cutting off the Hyuga and the Inuzuka in fiery debate. Sorry for the interruption, but you will need to excuse me. A guest heads my attention. We will continue this conversation tomorrow. Naruto stated, standing before them. The heads grumbled and nodded, leaving the room in groups. Naruto waited till the last member left, then stood himself and left as well, Shizune close at hand. Through the many blank halls he was still reminded of the days running through here for his next journey. But the sense of a journey gone in its stead with the fights around every corner. They never stop, do they? What else do I have today? He asked. Shizune pressed the clipboard closer, gazing over the day. Just your meeting with Mei. Then that's all for your party this evenings. Men and women from throughout all the villages are coming tonight. Everyone wants to see you again. Shizune said with a beam, finding Naruto was beaming himself. Naruto nodded, he knew it well. Having word of almost everyone he once met would be present tonight, from Koyuki and Haku. All of them brought back memories to him of better times. You'll be there tonight, right? He asked. Of course Naruto, I wouldn't miss it. She blushed and instantly felt the heat and shook herself, keeping her composure as only an assistant. Good, I'll see you there. I won't need any help for the rest of the day. You should take the day off. He stated. To his office he went, where he found Tsunade sitting at his desk, her legs up on his desk, looking at him with a devious smile. The room was the same as before, with the large desk standing in the middle, and the many windows beaming with sunlight. Everything was in order, all but his once Hokage. Excuse me, miss. I think you are lost. He spoke, standing before his desk, his hands resting in his pockets. Oh, am I? She pondered, sitting up, looking around as if she was lost. Silly me. I forgot my job is taken by a brat. She quipped and smiled mockingly. She went from the chair with grace, standing before her young genin, only a boy in her eyes. Always just a boy. You didn't visit me last night. Do I need to give you something special, or did you forget the reason I help you? She purred. From the once stern Hokage, Naruto saw the determination in her eyes. That gleam. Meetings. Was all that needed to be said. She knew the days of Hokage well, every day a torture to her, while she would rather gamble or drink sake. They bury you. Tsunade beamed. That's why I brought my young blonde a present for the party. Tsunade said with the biggest smile ever. Grabbing a bottle and cups from the desk and rested it down. Sake. Naruto stated, looking down at the large bottle. Trust me, you will drink every drop. She declared, twisting the bottle and poured the alcohol into the cups. The liquid was the same he saw Tsunade drink every day. I've never tried sake. Naruto stated, always staying distant from drinking alcohol. Today is the first for many things, my Hokage. It still felt so foreign for her to say. She offered him the small cup. Naruto grabbed it and clinked it against hers. Without thought he downed the drink. His throat burned as the drink ran down his throat. Looking back at Tsunade, she smiled unlike anything, with another cup filled to the brim. Another. He took it and downed, coughing. Her laughs filled the room watching the young boy drink sake. So Naruto, let's talk about the document I wanted to do. With you now is the time. The next day, the sun rose hot and hard waves of heat rose and shimmered off the stone of the Hokage's house. A large house in comparison to Naruto's once tiny apartment. Inside the large bed chamber the air smelled of heavy mustard. The sounds of breathing stirred Naruto's ears, who was laying in his bed, deep from sleep. Awaking to the sun, it shined bright into the room consuming all of Naruto's vision, blinking, the bright light burning his eyes like a vampire. Once he found himself, a headache crashed down on him unlike ever before, torturing his brain. It took him a moment before he came to. When he did, however, he was greeted to a sight he couldn't ever imagine. Around him, women laid beside him in his bed and strewn around the room. Naruto's eyes bulged from his head, not believing his sight, as women were everywhere in the room. His breath was heightened, looking from side to side rapidly. To his right, Tsunade head rested on his chest, her pushed against him and her soft breathing against his chest. To his left he saw the ponytail of Ino with her arm wrapped tightly around him. Further down on his leg Sume laid, and beside her Temari and Karui. Opposite his large bed on the ground he saw the blonde woman known as Samui with Hana. And in the corner on a couch Hinata, and unbelievable seeing the bright red hair of the Mizukage. And all throughout his room women he knew were there and women he wouldn't believe were present. At first he thought of last night. Only he couldn't remember the night previous. Not a thing came to him, he couldn't say and think a moment from last night. With nothing recalled. Without a peep he leisurely eased Ino and Tsunade off of him and moved up sitting. Looking back and forth he saw no one was awake and stood himself from the bed. Tiptoeing his way past the many women, until he reached the door. Exited the room he found more women asleep. Trying to clear his mind he headed for the kitchen. To the fridge he grabbed the milk, pouring himself a drink. He stood there trying to stir himself and find himself. There was an uneasy feeling in his chest, the same when he fought an enemy, yet that felt like a long time ago, and no matter how hard he thought, nothing came to him. Tough night. A familiar voice softly spoke from behind him. Before he responded, Anko draped her slender arms around the young Hokage's waist. Her soft tits pressed into his back. Looking back he found her with that bright purple hair and that smile she always wore. A bright smile that spoke of desire and a smirk unlike any other. A smile he could never read but only hid the madness. Without thought she leaned forward, pressing her slender lips to his. Naruto at first shocked and thought to push her away. The smell of her and her soft lips, he couldn't help but ease himself into her, letting the feeling consume him. Her tongue roughly pushed into his mouth as it danced all over him. After a period she leaned back with a smile. "How is my Hokage this morning?" Her voice flowed like honey, unlike the times he spent with her as just a genin and her a sensei. She no longer saw a young brat, but an older brat. With the days of him being Hokage she still enjoyed to tease him when possible, even if he was her superior. She herself let go of him and grabbed the milk and pouring herself a drink. Anko, he said. "I can't remember a thing from last night," he declared. She looked at him and smiled. "You're joking, right? What? You get drunk for the first time?" She quipped with a smile. "No," he said, bringing her down. "Nothing?" she asked, and he shook his head. "Sit down. You're not with me, are you?" she asked, sitting down in front of him. "Anko, I'm not." "Well, where to begin?" Tsunade told all of us that the Uzumaki clan needed to be at the height of its once power. That any who wished to join you signature a document. And then you showed me and others just how much of a pervert you really are. She purred, being reminded of the night previous with a gleam in her eye. Naruto was no longer listening, thinking deeply of one woman and a document she tried to have his signature. Anko watched as the young Hokage rubbed his forehead with frustration. What is it? She asked. Tsunade. What about her? Anko asked. She's up to this. She's vexed to place that document in place. And I wouldn't off on it. Anko listened and distinguished exactly what he was speaking of. With this, Naruto saw a smile creep her lips, a grin that couldn't mean anything reasonable. What? He asked. Well, you did. And so did I, as well as others. Anko explained, causing goosebumps to run down his arms. She meant the dozens of women in his apartment. How many? He asked quickly. Hard to say, the women here and more. It was quite the party, Hokage. Anko said, pondering. Without another word, abruptly he stood from the table. With a gusto he headed back to the bedroom where his fate awaited him. Back into the room, the sun blared into his eyes, and shined over the musty bright room. A room once empty, now all strewn about, the women still laid in a deep sleep. All except for one. The Hokage. Tsunade laid on his bed, turned facing him, her arm propped up resting against her face, with her leg propped up giving him full access to her curves and perky body. Naruto had never seen such bust on anyone, losing his thoughts for a time. Staring at him, her eyes filled with a lust only on him, with a smile. For a moment he stared at her, seeing the devious smile on her face, his own face wearing nothing. Without a word she threw her legs over the bed and stood on her feet, pulling her coat over her body, still giving him a view of her body. She swayed over to him, taking her time as if she owned everything. Once before him she batted her eyes. He stood there without any movement or without any emotion, staring at her. Standing before him, she a smile, seeing his intensity, gazing up into his eyes. I knew it wouldn't take long for you to figure it out, stud. I guess this isn't what you had planned for being Hokage. She mocked. He stood there, not sharing her smile. We need to talk about this. He declared. I'll go wherever you want me. She purred. Naruto and her left the room, finding another area alone. Once the door closed, Naruto turned on a dime and on her. You placed in the document? I did. She declared. I told you we weren't going to talk about this. She tilted her head to the side with a smirk. I took matters into my own hands. You told me, you wouldn't do it, you wouldn't go through with it. So, I saw no other option. And last night you did the deed. Her smile she wore was foreign for even her. Where is it? He asked. Without a question she slipped the large document out from her pocket. As of its release, of its very reveal from it. Ah, even if you grab this, it has your signature. With several copies in the Hokage Tower. And besides, Naruto, look at this. Tsunade flipped the document open. The document ran down to the floor with names and names. Naruto looked over it, shocked with the list of names. This many? He asked, astonished. You would be surprised. It is in order, whether you like it or not. And moreover, we need your clan to full strength again. Your clan was fierce as of any. What I've seen, she said lustfully. You're up for the challenge. You will find being Hokage is tedious and dull. And we both know you, of all people, need enjoyment in your life. Weren't you the one who told me how much you miss fighting? How much, with this peaceful and nice exterior, you miss fighting for life and death? You yearn for excitement and action. We both know it's true. We both know how dull the meetings are. How will you get rush from now, Hokage? She mocked. Naruto stared at her. He saw no option from this. He knew what would come eventually. What the elders spoke, they as well wanted the Uzumaki clan back to power, that always kept peace. A clan unlike any of the others to bring peace for all. And they saw Naruto as an example, as he could hold peace for generations. With all these thoughts, Naruto found a new life. When I am to marry? He asked. Give it time. I'm going to work. I'm late already. Before he could leave, Tsunade leaned forward, kissing him on the lips, sharp and slightly sweet. Immensely he lost himself in her. His hands moved up her body slowly, letting her soft body feel against his fingers. As her slender hand worked its way down into his pants, grasping his huge thick and giving him a single stroke. "Don't forget what I said, young one. And don't forget I only belong to you," she whispered, pecking him on the lips. He leaned forward, but she stopped him. "But you're right, you have to go," she said, batting her eyes. Naruto felt his heart gazing into her eyes, wanting her. Losing himself for a moment, he shook the lust from his mind and she left their room, leaving him with a hard-on. With thought of her, he left the area. Out of the door he stood looking at the sun for a moment, letting reality sink into him. It was as normal as any other day, the sun shining upon the village. Only it was as far from a normal day it had ever been. The sky bright and flowers blooming. It wasn't the weather but the many women laid strewn about in his house. The day was dawned bright and clear. He took off down the street towards the tower. His mind was filled with thoughts, he couldn't help it, his enormous prick growing in his pants. On several occasions on the street when someone yelled Hokage, Naruto had to shake his mind of the lust he clearly had. With trouble thinking of anything but with his pent-up pants anyone could clearly see. Until he finally reached his tower and up into his office. Inside in the room his work waited him like a demon, ready to sink a dagger into his brain and settled until it consumed him with a decay. Standing there, Naruto sat at the chair and grabbed several stakes of paper the height of a human standing before him. He sighed, then cracked his knuckles, ready for the day. An hour reading over several papers while with his signature others, he stared at the paper, only he couldn't see it but women before him. Taking another paper he stared and saw another woman, Anko, and her perky bust. The pencil in his hand broke into pieces. After some time he couldn't help but ponder the women from the morning. In a single week of being Hokage his life had turned around completely. Now with the knowledge of his harem of wives he could hardly think of anything but the many women. Sitting at the desk he still saw Ino, Tenten, Samui. All women of such beauty, all goddesses, and all hard to break from his mind. The door abruptly opened and Shizune went into the room. She smiled brightly with a fragrance about her. "Good morning, Naruto," she whimsically spoke, unlike anything he heard from her before. Everything was same. All but her kimono was lower, reliving her cleavage as well with a brightest beam to her face. Naruto stood from his desk and before the desk. "Good morning." Before he could speak she leaned forward, capturing his lips and smashed into his. The complete unawareness of this caught Naruto off guard, standing there for a moment shocked. Leaning back he didn't know how to react, neither what she was acting like. She was blushing madly, and was breathing heavily. "I know I shouldn't, Hokage. But last night was amazing," she declared, staring at the floor, avoiding his gaze. Naruto needed a second to let this sink in. Yesterday he was single, now he knew he was to marry more women he would ever think. I mean, of course. He corrected himself. She smiled brightly and leaned forward, kissing him passionately, her hands up his body and pressed to his face. Feverishly she kissed him, letting the feeling take hold of her and never let go. The same feeling she felt the night previous, and she basked in it. However, he knew he needed to stop this. Bringing his hands to her arms, gently bringing them to her sides. She looked at him confused, with her arms at her sides down. "What? Did I do something wrong?" she asked. "Shizune, I need tell you. I do not remember anything from last night." She smiled at him. "Naruto, don't joke about such things," she jested. "I'm not Shizune." He spoke honestly. "You really don't remember anything from last night?" she asked, hurt in her tone. "No," he responded. I confessed to you how I felt and you told me you felt the same. You really don't remember a thing from last night." She asked quickly. I'm sorry, I don't. He confessed. She stood there for a moment taking in what he said all in. She was at a loss for words. The silence consumed all of the air, nothing but the constant sounds from outside. With a smile she concealed her sorrow. Finally, after years, she confessed and felt her face bright warm. That's okay, Naruto. It was just a night fling anyways. Just forget it. I'll get your papers, she said and took a step back, heading for the door. With frustration, Naruto knew it, rubbed his forehead knowing he messed up. He stood moving towards her and caught her arm in a few strides. Wait, he said, and she halted. He grabbed her and spun around before she could speak. He held her, leaning forward, pressing his lips to hers. His lips pressed to hers as the warmth shot up her spine. Imminently she felt the warmth and felt nothing like it. Only a kiss, and he leaned back. He noticed she was blushing madly. Shizune, forgive me. He spoke, and before he said anything else, again she kissed him. This time she held him as her arms ran down his muscles, her fingers against him. She threaded her fingers in his hair, gasping and trembling, heat twisting in her belly and rushing under her skin, unlike anything before. Don't leave, I do feel the same way for you, Shizune. You're beautiful. The air practically hummed with anticipation, and as she stared at the muscled young pup. They kissed as she wrapped her hand around his, leading him back to his seat, the entire time blushing madly for what she was doing. He let her lead him his painfully as she brought him to his chair. Sit down, my Hokage, you've had a busy day and need to relax. He listened and sat down before her. Without any thought, she wanted to show her husband to be everything. Her body felt electric with desire, every square inch of her on fire. Her breathing quickened as she fought the tremendous urge to let her short kimono slip off her shoulders, to be in front of this young man, to reveal her body to him, to show him everything. She needed his desire, his touch, longing for years of the young Uzumaki. Always she was way too shy to mention her attraction for the young teenager. She felt nervousness creep under her skin like every day just when she was about to say how she felt, trying to make the first move. Pushing the shyness aside, raising her hands, she pulled down her entire kimono, letting it fall to the floor, reliving her impalpable slender body. With her clothes on the ground offered a clear view of magnificent small as she moved her hands back and forth, the puffy and erect. Her was clean shaven and looked tiny, framed by her wide hips. Her impeccable body was better than anything, her perky small tits stung with anticipation and her tiny wet glistening. Her twat glistening with her excitement, red and swollen. Naruto looked at her, drinking his now assistant, completely lost in her beauty. Looking up, seeing she was staring anywhere but his eyes, blushing madly. He knew he needed to ease the tension with one abrupt way to do it. Swiftly he stood from the chair and with one hand worked his clothes, ripping his attire to the floor, the sound causing Shizune to gasp in shock. The Hokage of Konoha standing complete before her. Shizune gasped, looking to find him, his impressive pecs and chest. Further south she gasped, having seen it. Still it was hard to believe seeing the massive 14-inch semi-erect monster. Her eyes stared at his massive pole. The rumors she guessed were true by the looks of it. You're beautiful, Shizune, he whispered, snapping her back to reality. Leaning towards him, she kissed him as her hand gently moved up to his neck, then down his chest to his tantalizing pecs. The entire time her hand shaking, never doing this so confidently. While Naruto was lost as the warm and curvy body explored him. After what seemed like an endless time, she finally said, Naruto, your assistant is to relieve you of your work. Why don't you sit back? She purred, and he obliged as he sat back. She smiled shyly to cover her embarrassment. As she never made the first move herself, feeling how much of her body was on display for this young man. She rested her hands on his shoulders, crouching above him. She leaned forward, pressing her slender lips to him. while she reached behind and she positioned his against her lips. Feeling his hard 15-inch. Positioned herself so the tip of Naruto's rested right before her entrance. Naruto could feel how warm and perfect it was. He grew hard as a diamond, and the cum in his balls began to boil. However, with all the overwhelming lust in his veins, he suppressed his urge to move at all. With one last look in his eyes, she gently eased herself down. Naruto felt cozy wetness at the tip of his engorged head, and Shizune descended on the wide phallus. With emotion she moved down and he heard her sharp intake of breath as she pushed down his, pressing against her lips. Shizune threw her head back as the feeling of the anticipation was running through her, like nothing before. She wanted her Hokage, the young man she had feelings for after all this time, to her unlike anything else and sink him into her. Although she was so wet she was still unable to slide herself into him. With some aggravation, his massive wouldn't fit. With much struggle she managed to pop his engorged head within her. The sudden intrusion caused her unbreakable pain. She bit down on her lip hard, knowing anyone could hear her out in the hall. Only a door standing between her and all of the village seeing her Hokage. Hands clutched his shoulders desperately as her eyes closed shut. Her wrapped tightly around him, causing a groan to slip through her Hokage's lips. The most exquisite feeling overwhelmed him as he felt soft moist heat cover his head. Shizune screeched, the first couple inches already testing her tight twat, stretching her. She forced her small crevice over the pillar, and her face contorted in pain. The invading log stretched her more than ever, and she gritted through her delightful agony. The small woman began to grind her hips on the titanic tool, slowly rolling her pelvis. The walls of her insides gripped the young Hokage tightly, her vagina stuffed to the limit with. The manhood strained her so thinly, she felt each popping, pulsing vein brush along her canal. Hums, moans, and squeaks of approval came from Shizune as she accommodated the new addition to her womanhood. I can't believe this. It's so numbing. I can't feel my toes, the skewered assistant informed, still pushing herself onto him. Oh Kami, Naruto, this is what I've thinking about during our meetings. I just can't say it. She confessed, Naruto shocked to hear this. As the assistant was blushing madly, sweat running down her form as her soft body pressed close against him. Only he sat back, seeing the pain apartment on his assistant's face. After a time, gently she eased herself further down and slid back up gradually several inches a few times. The faces she made were anything but what he witnessed before. Working the first few inches, she thought now or never, and with a thrust, she let her own lust propel his up her twat like a battering ram. The muscles in Naruto's neck tightened and he gritted his teeth as his super sword was sheathed inside of Shizune's snug warmth. Her wetness made the slippery preparation for the impending ride. The head of Naruto's pushed deeply against Shizune's cervix, causing the woman's body to twist in happy torture. The feeling like nothing ever, the pain so extracting, with 10 inches of him fitting inside her, pressing against her cervix. The sudden fullness of his hot meat overwhelmed her. He was thicker than she expected and she could feel her strain at his width. Shizune yelled loudly, unable to keep quiet. Hitting her breaking point, his assistant threw her head back. Implored as her orgasm came in waves. She could feel a fresh wave of pleasure and soon she exploded with a shout, her muscles clenched as the orgasm burst through her, releasing the tension and making her legs go weak. She went limp on him, breathing heavy. She laid against him. Naruto gazed over his sweat-heavy assistant, utterly beautiful. Lifted her chin and kissed the now sweating assistant. The feeling of her hot wetness that surrounded him felt utterly incredible, suffocating his. Realizing what she was doing, feeling embarrassed, she sat back up. Naruto hoped that the sound of the villagers outside is enough to mask it. After a time of no movement, Shizune looked at him. If the pain is too much, we can halt, he stated. She shook her head back and forth as without heed began her rocking again. Her mind exploded at the thought of a 12-inch her. She was in delightful pain. His first 12 inches tortured her cervix and she wanted more. She knew how to get it. She slowly slithered her arms up her curvaceous body and pushed her hand. Naruto was concentrating on watching his member slide in and out of her body. "Oh Naruto," she said between gasps, her voice in a tone, unlike herself ever she felt hot. "It feels amazing. Good ahead Naruto." She leaned forehead and kissed him on the cheek lovingly. "Giving him the single," she answered, pressing her full lips to his. Shizune's soft lips tasted sweet as they surprised Naruto. She forced her tongue against his and grabbed the sides of his head. They kissed passionately. The entire time he had sat back knowing if he thirsted he would cause more pain than needed. Even as he felt that blinding lust creep into every fiber he had kept it deep down. Shizune was grateful for that. With the scrunching pain stretching her wide she hardly knew how anyone could fit all of him inside. However he let that demon take him as he was gentle thrusting up into her causing his assistant to whimper. Calm in his thrusts, as if conducting an experiment and measuring each step, the combined sensation of his girth grinding her and the thought of anyone coming inside finding the Hokage his assistant felt so naughty and unlike anything she had ever did brought her to the brink of orgasm. Even with just gentle thrust. The thrusts were measured and not to cause pain, with a final thrust. The pain began to dissipate as she grew used to the size. At this time she wanted to give her Hokage what he was missing. Naruto. Shizune. Before he could finish she slammed herself down on him, bringing a scream from her and a groan from him. And before he knew it, she worked him, taking each inch with pain, bouncing above him her trying desperately to fit him inside her. He groaned with his lips having formed a shaky grin, letting the beast and lust fill him. Having that feeling he gave her a powerful thrust causing Shizune to yell out into the room as sweat ran down her body. With much difficulty she worked herself with 12 inches of him inside her tight vagina. "Me my Hokage," she said with an evil little smile, while tightening her cunt around his in a delicious way. Naruto became blinded with lust and Shizune harder, grabbing her. She returned his thrusts with a ravenous gallop. They pounded one another until they were at the speed of a vicious gallop. "I've always wanted you," she added in a breathy whisper as she raised herself up. Pleased with the lustful expression on his face she plunged back down again, relishing the groan that left his mouth. He obliged and with planted feet, resting his hands on her bubble rump he thirsted. Naruto's huge pushed its way through Shizune's tight crevice much too fast, and Shizune paid for it. She did not stop screaming up to the ceiling. Naruto barred his teeth as Shizune's engulfed him more tightly. It was the tightest thing he ever felt, and his was throbbing inside of her. Pleasure ran over his body, and just as he thought he couldn't ever feel better, Shizune began to him with a blurry relentless gallop. Shizune's hips drove into the Naruto's eagerly, accepting his 10 inches into her warm. The thickness of his member hurt her with each thrust, but it only made her rhythm that much fiercer. Her head gazed up into the ceiling seeing starts the feeling consuming all of her. The sweat ran down her body as she tried to fit more of him into her already stretched. Naruto groaned as she worked her way back up, this time working up the inner thighs. She fought for each ragged breath, as he fed her inch after inch. He wanted her to feel all of him enter her pleased. It had only been a few minutes since she had grasped, but Naruto's groin and part of his stomach were already shining with his assistant's juices. She began to ride him wildly, her small tits shaking wildly as she rammed herself up and down the massive. Naruto groaned as he watched her shake hypnotically, ramming her cunt onto Naruto's pole. And she went blind, slamming herself down on him and pulling her back up with no regard for her pain. Only a few moments loud wet sucking sounds echoed through the room as Shine rode Naruto monstrous pull while her clear, orgasmic juices jetted from her plump muff with each thrust. Naruto himself was with speeds in tandem with Blur, while holding on to her broad hips as if his life depended on it. When he looked up he noticed the blissful expression on the once shy assistant. The same woman whom always stayed calm at even the worst situations. Shizune, what has gotten into you? He stated, loving the feeling. Everything, my Hokage. I feel so hot, she declared, bouncing above him, feeling his push against her cervix. As his balls tightened, pre-cum shooting through his like a fire hose. His orgasm was harder than any he ever felt, and he would not stop pumping his seed inside. You are hot, Naruto declared to her. Shizune shouted to the beat of her gallop. And looked down, soon found out that that sight was the last straw. Shizune's pleasure went into overload. Her mind went blank as ecstasy overwhelmed her. The precipice she was launched off was more than an orgasm, it was enlightenment. Naruto's was the she was destined to have, and she was getting all she deserved. She rode her orgasm long and hard, her back arched and she threw her head back shouting into the sky, climax. Her pleasure building inside her again. Naruto increased the speed he pounded her. Her eyes grew wide as tears ran down her face. For a half an hour he continued his her to another plane. Her hands clawed at his back, causing him to grunt, his swelling inside her. Naruto was nearing his climax, and Shizune knew her lover was going to blow. Quote, exclamation mark, quote, was all that was said from Naruto. Naruto laid his hands on his assistant broad, firm hips, causing her to stop, slamming her down on his monster as he fired his first blast of thick cum. As he pumped his sperm into Shizune, sending her into a crazed screech of ecstasy, shattering her. Obliged, and Shizune's screams continued for several minutes, all while Naruto pumped his seed into her womb. She moaned loudly as the blast of searing hot cum shot against the walls of her womb and filled her in a matter of a second. Her hot cunny was filled up deliciously. When Naruto's second and third barrage spewed forth from his, her twat was filled and spewed onto the floor, a large puddle on the floor. While her body shuddered in orgasmic pleasure. When his orgasm had finally come to an end, her trembled around his member and his stomach was coated with her orgasmic juices. They laid kissing her fervent. Naruto couldn't help himself. Grabbing, lifting her up, his hands were glued to her magnificently plump and were palming it involuntarily. She was breathing heavily and trying to recover from the vicious that had just transpired. Shizune placed a small kiss on the young Hokage's cheek. Laying her down on the desk, knocking all of his hard work from the day earlier was nothing to him. Every piece of paper fell to the floor as the signatures were ruined. Naruto wasted no time as he hammered himself into her, stretched several times. The desk felt cold against Shizune's back, which contrasted with the warmth from Naruto's body on top of her, slamming into her. Oh Naruto, I won't let this end quick. I won't be without you all day. She let the young stud kiss down her chest. He pushed one of her plump in his mouth and squeezed her tit, filling his mouth. With elegant he slid his into her. Her was wet and hot, the begging for attention. Slowly inserting his into the wetness, drawing up the lubrication to stroke her swollen. Her senses were at overload, her hand gripping the boy's thick hardness, its throbbing heat matching her hot button, while its sight and smell drew him in. Sensations that were screaming through him. His was painfully hard while she was in delightful pain. His 14 inches tortured her cervix and Naruto became blinded with lust at the reminder, and Shizune harder, grabbing her. He returned his thrusts with a ravenous gallop. He pounded her until he was at the speed of sound. Punching into the depths so deep she lost her breath for a moment. Naruto couldn't stop himself, letting the demon take hold again, pounding himself into the woman into a abyss, his thrusts now a blur as her bounced wildly. with already another orgasm causing Shizune's head to shoot back and to scream as her tightened around him. She had never felt anything so big in her before, and couldn't believe the overwhelming orgasm that rushed through her entire being. She screamed and bucked on him and squirted all over his hairless torso, completely lost. Over and over again the waves crashed through her as he tried to ease himself up into her. He thrust into her harder, harder until once more he was about to blow. For a time she screamed with pain until it subsided. After an hour of the best moment of her life her orgasm waned. Her body was limp against the desk. Body resting against his desk she couldn't stop her moans. Naruto was still pumping her the entire time as she felt his rock slam against her cervix knowing he desperately wanted to delve deeper but wouldn't. Causing her to grit her teeth realizing how much she needed to be better than anyone. Throwing her body up, she moved her body back and forth with him. Never would another come for her beloved, only her. Oh yes. Shizune, grinding her hips in rhythm to Naruto's thrusts. Naruto pawed at Shizune's as they fluidly bounced back and forth. He needed the soft pillows, losing himself in the perfect texture of her melons. Naruto leaned down to suck on her delicious wrapping his lips around her. Oh my Hokage, you love it. You love it. Shizune observed, her pleasure building inside her again. Naruto increased the speed he pounded his assistant, her eyes grew wide as tears ran down her face. For a half an hour he continued his her to another plane. Her hands clawed at his back causing him to grunt his swelling inside her. Naruto was nearing his climax, and Shizune knew her lover was going to blow. I wanted this secretly Naruto for you to fill me with your cum for so long. I don't want to wait any longer. Those heavy balls going to pump load after load of potent jizz to fill my womb, wrapping her legs around him. You're so tight, he accused, teetering on the edge of his release his speed nothing but a blur. His heavy balls slapping against her. I want you. Shizune prepared, her pleasure reaching the precipice like nothing else on this planet. I'll fill you to the brim. Naruto stated, pushing deep into her repeatedly. If you are so dedicated, then me full. Shizune he didn't think twice as he thirsted into the heavenly crevice. Naruto couldn't stop his violent pounding if he tried. He wasn't capable of not coming inside Shizune. I can't halt. I'm coming. He hollered, his jubilation coursing through him. I'm orgasming too. My Hokage. She screamed, her toes curling as her climax exploded inside her and her senses turned up as she screamed. She felt her body dissolve to pieces, her every muscle shook as her voice screeched into the air. Exploded inside her, she felt his cum gush through his inside her. Feeling his eyes on her legs, Kami, she wanted to just end right here. While staring into her Hokage's face, her orgasm surged through her unlike ever before. Juices coating his as her hips rode him. The pain was too much and she screamed in unbelievable pain, Naruto still her. Naruto cannoned his next blast of jizz into her, his head pushed right against her cervix filling her womb to the rim. Shizune wrapped her legs tightly around his hips and involuntarily rubbed her against his pelvis. Naruto fired another load of thick, potent semen into the fertile woman, the cum filling her and pouring onto the desk. He shot loads larger than he ever had before, coating the inside of Shizune's womb with sperm. She bucked her hips below him as sweat ran down her body. Never did her orgasm seem to halt, she only rode it harder. For minutes he lost count of how many times he blasted spunk into his lover. As he shot his last explosion of jizz, Shizune came down from her intense climax. Both breathed heavily, fully satisfied. Shizune and Naruto slumped to the desk, a heap of post-coital bliss. She had enjoyed the full pleasures of with another human, and neither could think correctly for some time. After Shizune regained some kind of composure she looked side to side seeing the mess they made. The Hokage's office was filled with screams and groans, continuous as a chorus reaching max volume. Shizune was currently a few feet in the air, her body wrapped tightly around her Hokage. Naruto's arms were locked around her forearm, hooked closely under her knees with his hands holding her cheeks. Her legs spread far apart, giving him the access he needed. Shizune had draped her arms closely around his shoulders as he held her up off the ground. With her in the air, he slammed his abnormally massive forward into her stretched twat. His super sword was sheathed inside of Shizune's snug warmth. Her unbelievable tightness wrapped around him. For hours Naruto lost himself thrusting his shaft deep into his needy assistant's cunt, her non-stop. Shizune's face was in tears as she screamed. She had elapsed what time it was or even what day it was. Her eyes watering as her mind left this world and ecstasy filled it. Her cries were answered by her punisher. Naruto gripped her hips and with swift force shoved himself into her. The speed of their fornication rapidly increased as their pleasure took them to a trance. Their only thoughts were of ecstasy. Naruto could feel his wife's to be nails dig into his back as he sped up. Her tight little was giving him so much pleasure, he never wanted to stop his fierce forceful thrusts. The walls of her insides gripped Naruto tightly, her vagina stuffed to the limit with. The manhood stretched her so thinly, she felt each popping, pulsing vein brush along her canal. Hums, moans, and squeaks of approval came from Shizune as she accommodated the new addition to her womanhood. Flowing passion heated Shizune's nether region as he increasingly quickened his riding, losing all thoughts other than pure desire. Keeping his arms wrapped around her hips, hands spreading her as he continued to drive his heart into her, over and over her yells never halting. He leaned forward clamming her screaming lips. An electric charge shot through him as their lips met. Breaking apart, Shizune moaned. "You never calm down," she told, surprised. His thrusts a blur and her moans lurid. Naruto drilled his prick into the slender woman, pounding away at her frame. The view of her body was spectacular as she was up in the air. The sounds of meaty slaps filled the room. Shizune's body covered in sweat, her hair disheveled nothing like before as she lost herself in time. Her body stung with ecstasy as he reformed her, trying to accept Naruto's abnormal huge. Naruto thrusted into her with no regard. She shook pleasingly as she bounced, their fluid motion hypnotizing. Naruto fixated his eyes on her dark, which sprung around as her shook. For in half an hour Shizune was up in the air and dizzy from the session. As time passed his thrusts were fiercer in vigor and she felt his swelling. Before he could let loose his load, to his surprise, his was gripped even tighter and felt as if it was sucking him in. Her was milking him. "Don't stop," she demanded, wrapping her legs around him, allowing his no escape. Naruto said nothing. He only quickened his thrust, slamming his hips forward, his orgasm inevitable. Naruto drove as far as he could up her warm and wet cunt deep into her womb. "You're going to make me cum," she yelled, her body's muscles locking in place. The woman came spasming crevice, waves of massive pleasure overloading nerves and dizzying her head. Her brushed him, her climax shook him, tremors of heaven shooting through her. Cries of happy bliss echoed in the room as she lost herself to the summit of gratification. Her walls covered him in a cozy grip, beckoning his cum forth. Shizune pushed him over the edge. Naruto howled as his balls tightened, cum shooting through his like a fire hose. His orgasm was harder than any he ever felt, and he would not stop pumping his thick seed inside of Shizune. Intensely as Shizune came down from one orgasm, another hit her. Shizune's orgasm hit her like a brick wall. "I'm coming again. I'm coming," she shouted, riding another perfect orgasm. With one last motion he pushed inside and let it all out with a groan. He could feel his cum exploding inside his wife's to be and it made him shake in pleasure. Finally he laid her down atop of the desk, his deeply embedded inside her, having come more times than he could count. Naruto finally looking over the cum-covered assistant, seeing her eyes bright red and watering. "I'm Goanna, need help walking," she stated. Later in the day, the sun on the horizon broke the shadows away as Naruto stood alone among the greenery and woodlands, the sun gleaming down through the leaves on his forearm. Here in the forest he trained for hours, the sweat apparent running down his exposed chest. Unlike before, he no longer trained with ninja stars or ninjutsu. In his right hand he grasped an iron short sword in a firm grip and drove the weapon forward with intensity. For the past few weeks Naruto ascertained various skills and styles of ninja and samurai, to recognize every effective attack. He selected a sword to train with, and the wooden faceless mannequins before him were losing the fight. Taking slice after vicious slice, the lumber splintering and cutting to pieces after each and every attack. For years Naruto traveled to this spot and could forget all else. Yet here in his unique abode he could hardly do that. The women apparent, images flashing non-stop. He could barely remember any supplementary thoughts, not a single treaty or trade deal, not his moves or his missions. Only the amazing, amazing women. And more prominently their smiles burned into his brain, the ensnaring smell of them and their succulent voices. Their beautiful bodies before him constantly. He was going to be married and he couldn't stop thinking of the day with Shizune. It was a thought better than any in recent years. Whilst he was deep in his mind, a lone voice rang, breaking him from his thought. "Hey, Naruto, how are you husband-to-be?" Tenten asked from behind him with a devious smile. Naruto turned back to find the young woman a few meters from his position, in her white and red attire with several weapons on her back and a blush on her cheeks. Naruto overheard her say husband, and remembered seeing her the previous night. Before their marriage, to be the young ninja trained with Naruto for weeks and weeks prior. Each day they met to spar for hours, a part of Tenten's days she cherished. Respectably, with each fight Naruto was unlike other combatants, always with stamina and a new skill to use in a fight. Naruto recognized this not to be the time to tell her he had no recollection of the previous night. Instead he was ready for a fight. Feeling splendid and ready for a long night of fierce commotion. "I hope you're ready," Naruto told with an eagerness. Tenten smiled luminously and left into the small wooden armory. Naruto built it a year ago, needing a place to store his cache of weapons, an armory where the stockades of death awaited. A dream of bows and axes as far until the shadows ascended and covered the wood. Lest only the weapons were for her. Deeping into darkness she found her weapon. Wrapping her hand around the familiar hilt, she felt that equivalent energy. With a sensation she made her way back to Naruto in the wind. Back out of the armory she found him standing, his legs straight as was his back with his head held high, he looked in his zone. Standing, waiting with a smirk that told her she wasn't prepared for this. Tenten seized that as a challenge. The past week her friend, now husband, had pressed her with each spar. Every night she seized a sword or spear, the exhaustion did nothing to deter her every spar. "You sure you want this, Tenten?" Naruto provoked her with a smile. As he said this, a spark of lighting flashed the air as the rain came down. "I must train if I am to be a great ninja like my husband." Tenten noticed his smirk as she looked over him, letting her eyes linger over his exposed muscles. The two moved into stance, Tenten rising her left leg, her sword rose over her head. The sun glimpsed against their weapons in her pupils. Never did Tenten look more in her zone. Like nothing could touch her. Nothing could faze her. They assembled themselves, and before she knew it Naruto darted forward. His weight pressed down on her left leg as he stabbed his sword forward towards Tenten's chest. The power of the ninja was forced forward, yet Tenten blocked his flurry, and was quick to counter with one of her own. She didn't score a direct hit, but she did force him to take a full step back under the fury of the assault. The sound of steel echoed as Naruto's foot splashed in a puddle. Before giving Tenten a chance, Naruto twisted, leaving him to slash at her stomach. Yet unlike before, Tenten was ready for this, switching from offense to defense smoothly. It seemed to be a single action. She parried the blade as it moved with a blur, outmatched. Then all at once Naruto moved his weapon on his wife, with savage blows, the hums thumping to a mixed beat. Every single limb of her body was open for attack, and Naruto's weapon tried to strike, only to be met by Tenten's weapon. Naruto thrust his weapon forward with determination for her stomach, chest and arms, only ending with no direct hits. They progressed with a blur, only seen as they moved from the ground up to the trees. Their spins and attacks growing grander and fiercer with each bout. Portions of tree limbs breaking apart as splitters flashed through the sky. This was Naruto's passion, and excitement occupied him to his core. Naruto carried his weapon in a furious slash at her shoulder, only to be answered by Tenten's own weapon. Another slice and another parry after parry, non-stop, until Naruto's speed was unable to be matched and brought with a blur to Tenten's chest, halting just before the skin. They looked at the other, eyes met, Naruto nodding in agreement. They backed away, regaining their composure. The mud covered half of Tenten's body as several splashes covered Naruto's legs. With this, both wore heavy smiles and looked into the other's eyes, saw the smile that two always shared with the other. You have improved. You must be practicing without me, Naruto told, and flashed her a smirk. Moving around her, she slipped her weapon in a circle. Tenten nodded with a smile, basking in the compliment. Her breathing was hard, her body covered in sweat and her blood pumping adrenaline, unlike him, whom retained his composure the entire spar. She had longed to engage another opponent in the dueling ring. She considered her teacher the best in all villages, and he never let his guard down, fighting as if he was 7 ninjas at once. Naruto spun, the sound of sword thrashing hers as they continued their dance. No matter what she tried, Naruto's blade was there to parry the attack. A seed of doubt crept her mind as she recalled her teacher. She remembered Might Guy's voice in her head, bringing her weapon forward. The rain and muck roofed her face, basking her in smells and a light. The sword felt boundless in her hand, the weapon a release from herself, like nothing had ever felt so right in her hand. The clouds hung low, thick above them, as the rain grew into a chorus beating against Tenten's face. She welcomed the sting on her surface. Faces a grimace as red-hot daggers of pain shot through her body. The battle continued in the familiar rhythm of combat, the ebb and flow of attack and defense. Tenten knew to make sure her attacks were effective. Each time she wavered off her opponent's charges with quick parries as the surge and swell of each exchange detonated. The sweat obvious, but the power still apparent as well. Tenten let the fire billow and take grasp of her, giving herself to the burning embers, her heart pumping as she leaned up. Neither stopped their spar for several minutes until Naruto knew what she was going to do next. More importantly, he knew with absolute certainty what Tenten would do next. He couldn't explain how he distinguished, sometimes he could just anticipate an opponent's next move. With another resounding slash intended for his head, Naruto was more than ready and brought his own sword to meet. The bang sounded, rain splashing against the metal. Then as she twisted, with a flurry, his sword was to quick and rested against Tenten's neck, discontinuing all momentum. Tenten had to blink a few times as the weapon rested against her skin, deprived of knowing how it ended up there. They stood for a moment stagnate. Meanwhile, Tenten stood a loss of words. How did you do that? In that last pass you broke off your attack in the middle of one sequence and came at me in a different angle. I guess it just happened. Tenten didn't know what to say, only for her to throw the sash down in the armory as she was ready for more. not quitting. Ten turned with her husband. Naruto's smile was immense as Ten had never seen so. She had witnessed Naruto spar firsthand and saw how fast he would be. For hours they kept to it, the sounds of steel hitting the other was all to hear. Sweat ran down her, proof of her dedication, her never wanting to halt. All the while the one whom never wanted to break a spar was before her. She knew how often the sword was in his hand. Every day he apprehended a sword as an extension of his arm. And with his knowledge he gave all of it up to his wife. Never once did she halt. Never stopping during training session, she was more than jubilant. An hour of this continued, mud covering the two. Ten proved to be an opponent, but Naruto came on top with each spar. While both couldn't clearly say how much they enjoyed this, here they spent hours. Unknown to the two, someone in Anbu armor stopped atop a branch watching from afar. Naruto finally made his way home after a long day. Pushing the door to his large home open, he slowly entered, only to find darkness. Nothing but darkness. Then he heard her. Naruto. He caught Ten say. Yeah, I can't see a thing in here. Where are you? Follow my voice, Naruto. She spoke with a purr. Deeper in the darkness he stopped, finding her nearly glint in shadow, then the light flipped on. His eyes opened wide as he found Ten before him and noticed she was wearing a different pair of red fishnet from head to toe, doing nothing to cover her body, revealing much of her form. Upon her feet a pair of high heels, and upon her lips a shady lipstick giving her a pop. Ten, he asked astonished. She simply came closer, a smile on her face, almost to him. Naruto. She spoke tenderly. I am here for you after a stressful day. I want you. There is no man, kind and gentle as you. I must confess I've always wanted you. She stared at him for a moment, seeing love in his eyes. I want you. I have never seen anything as clear as this. I can see. Vivid in my eyes, bright and burning. He leaned forward, capturing her lips, opened his lips this time and cautiously slipped the tip of his tongue forward, seeking out hers for a proper smooch. Meanwhile, they slipped their arms around each other's backs. She moaned, their lips still locked. He felt her return the kiss with her own tongue, pressing her chest out slightly so that her full pressed to him. Waves of pleasure spread through them as Ten and Naruto shared a passionate kiss. They broke the kiss, each panting in zeal. There was no word spoken, nothing was said, only a lustful expression worn on their faces. Without a need she wrapped her hand around his hands and leaned forward, she gently kissed his cheek. I want you as well. They moved through the halls, Ten quickly following him. In no time she found herself in his room. Again their lips find each other. In a heat of lust Naruto slips his tongue into Ten's as his hands explored her body. He wrapped his arms around her and pulled her in close for a hug, delighting in having her pressed against him. Kissing lovingly for a moment. I wish to see you naturally before me. She nodded. She leaned back and pushed the silky fabric and fishnet down her and falling on the floor. He wasted no time so that he could lower his lips to her collarbone and kiss a trail down to her. He wanted her, but honestly it was his lust that drove him as much as any noble sense of gratitude or duty. He wanted to taste and feel her nubile body. Her intimate, erogenous flesh was now open to him. That feels nice, she cooed as he kissed down her over her taut stomach to her mons pubis. He dropped to his knees and had access to her cunny, but he did not target there immediately. Instead, he kissed around her inner thighs. She wiggled and gyrated her hips. Sweet Ten, inviting him to partake in the pleasures of her perfect body. He followed her legs as they ran up to her taut, thick thighs into the curviest pair of hips he could ever need. All of her, before him, and saw her twat, clearly soaking wet. She placed her hands on his head, fingers digging into his feathery hair, egging him on. What are you about to do? She asked him, knowing full well. I'm going to get on my knees and worship you. Naruto said with a certainty. She could feel his breath on her inner thighs and she felt her hair stand up on end all over her body and felt herself tingle. He grabbed the sides of her, and shoved his face forward, a thick clear string of her juice pressed into him, and he licked her. Her juice made contact with his tongue and she tasted like delightful. She moaned as her weak knees crossed. He treated her to teasing brushes of his lips on her bare skin and the occasional lick, letting his hands wander over her. So close to her, he could feel her musk in his nostrils, drawing his attentions to her puffy pink lips, affecting him like pheromones. She was moaning to the insinuation of his tongue into her folds, the tip of his nose rubbing against her. His saliva mixed with her juices and he started licking her, which prompted the involuntary tensing and relaxing of her thighs as he began spelling the alphabet onto her firm little button. He kissed her mound and slowly made his way to her labia, placing kisses on her outer lips. Oh my god, Naruto, Ten moaned as she fell back towards the foot of her bed. Naruto kissed down her thighs, and slowly kissed until he reached the dripping wet core of Ten's. He inhaled her scent deeply, savoring every moment. She smelled strong, pungent, savory, and sweaty, with a hint of strawberry. No other thoughts, starting slow at first, getting his tongue deeper into Ten's dripping cunt. He wanted to enjoy giving her pleasure. Please don't stop. Ten whimpered as Naruto licked deeper and deeper into her nether regions. She tasted like heaven, a musky, womanly heavy scent. This wasn't just strawberries anymore, it was the sticky, slick taste of her. It invaded his mouth and intoxicated him. There wasn't a taste in the world better than this. She moved up on the bed and invited him up, and he buried his face between her legs, covering him in her juices while she moaned. He pulled back and looked it in all its glory. Her cunny had an interesting flavor, a little tangy, but pleasant. He sat up and looked her. You taste like heaven, Ten. And you feel amazing. She said back, bringing a finger to rub her slit before slipping into her tight, moistening. He could tell that the passion filled her, as if the more explicit their words the fainter everything else became. He began to curl and uncurl his finger inside her, still sucking, licking and kissing her engorged. Her thick outer lips framed her cute inner ones, and her was engorged, reddish pink and clearly sensitive to the touch. He slowly licked it, savoring the taste. And she tasted like perfection as he proceeds to finger her as he licked her with vitality. Oh, she moaned. Ten's eyes went white, body arching as the climax came in full force. Biting her lip, she let a cute little moan. Riding her orgasm for a time unlike ever before. It made her glow from her head down to her toes. After several moments she laid there basking in sweat. They lay together for a while, their hot, contented bodies close, watching as light filled the room. Then he rose, and stole a quick kiss. They each tasted of the other. Why are you still wearing that? He realized he was fully clothed, and quickly stripped down. She looked at him, admiring him. Ten traced big Naruto's chest with her fingers, his perfectly formed chest, and rubbed her hands on his massive arms. God damn, you're chiseled like some kind of a professional, she said to him. You spent all that time in the courtyard for the past 10 years. Who knew it would all end up with everything you've built, with those arms wrapped around me while you me. Ten, you're going to make me lose it just talking like that, he said as he kissed her, silencing her teasing lips. She sucked his tongue, swallowing Naruto's saliva. She knew saliva couldn't taste like much, but somehow it did. It tasted addicting, manly, even sweet. She just sucked and sucked while he swirled his tongue inside her mouth, reaching underneath hers, and around, while his hand cupped her and the other gently went behind her head. They kissed as their bodies slowly adapted to embracing each other. As they made out, Ten's hands explored Naruto's back and shoulders, feeling every nook and cranny that his toned muscles made underneath his skin. She shuddered as she felt Naruto's tongue underneath hers. This man had loved her, taken care of her, consoled her, been there for her. She wanted to give herself to Naruto, her strong, handsome, kind Naruto. She pulled away from his kiss. Why am I while and your pants are still on? Take those off, Naruto, she said, smiling. Naruto laughed. She was so naughty about the fact that this was. She was reveling in it. He pulled them off quickly as his massive sprung to a tension in the air. She could only gasp by its massive girth. Thick with angry veins covering its throbbing 15 inches. This is a monster, she said. She wrapped her hands around his, slowly stroking it, feeling its warmth. And it's so goddamn thick. I don't know how this could ever fit in a woman, she said, still staring at Naruto's as she started to stroke it. It fits fine, are very flexible, they adapt. Naruto told her. It was so cute to him how innocent and unlearned she was in all of this. Oh, there you go, he exclaimed as her stroking began to really take effect. I'm going to put this in my mouth the best way I know how. Ten said to him. She was perfect in every way, naughty and innocent. Experienced and yet completely uninitiated. He smiled as she slowly took the head and the first inch of the shaft popped into her mouth. With much difficulty she managed another 2 inches and halted. There was just no way she could do more. He stared down and saw her perfect face staring up at him. She licked and sucked gently, and looked like an angel. His ten with her lips wrapped around his. She pulled him out of her mouth, a small trail of saliva falling onto her chest. The head of his glistened with ten's saliva. I can't fit it down, Naruto. It's too big. But I need you to show me, be gentle with me. But you need to take over. I'm giving myself to you, Naruto. Do what you want with me, but please don't be rough. Naruto pulled himself down over her body, and kissed her nose and then her lips. This woman was perfection. I've never hurt you before, and I'm not going to hurt you now. Trust me, he whispered as he tugged gently at her ear with his mouth. I do, she whispered back. He reached down to her dripping wet and found her completely soaking. She was definitely ready. He lined up his to her entrance. This was it. He looked at her, as she lay there, somehow both smiling yet full of anticipation and arousal. It was a look he had seen before. He grabbed her hand. I want you to feel this as it happens, he said. He placed it where his touched her outer labia. And he moved the head of his into her core and slowly rubbed himself up and down. The head of his was wet with ten's juice. Slowly, he placed it right at the entrance. Her sacred chamber. The seat of all of his desires and his love and his passion. You ready, ten? He asked. I'm ready, she replied. The words that came out of her lips were wild, and turned him on even more. With her hand feeling where his met her entrance, he looked into her eyes and slowly began to push himself into her. First, the head of Naruto slowly disappeared into her body as she whimpered, and then, he felt it. Resistance. This wasn't going to be easy. He was too big for her and he could see it plain on her face. She watched him as he slowed down. Naruto, I don't care how much this hurts tonight. Just hold my hand and push, though just stop if I say stop. Okay, he said. She was a seductress with those words. He kept pushing through, inch by inch as she whimpered and finally, screamed. His reforming her entire twat to his massive size. She was so tight. He would have her harder inside her had it not been for the fear of hurting her that was running through his mind and taming his passions. Just give me a second, it's just a lot of pressure, she told him. Okay, whatsoever you need. he responded. After a minute of staring at her face shift between pain and pleasure, locked with only a few inches of his inside her, he began to feel an overwhelming sense of gratitude. This perfect, loving, amazing woman he trained with. Pushing deeper, he straddled her, blessing her perky with kisses and soft suckling, all the while plundering her wetness with eager thrusting. 1010's was tight and slick with lust. She panted and moaned. Soon he felt the sudden twitching and contracting around him and saw her abdomen tense. Her fingers dug deep, taking hold of him. All right, Naruto. I need you to ram it home. Just put it in all the way, hard and fast. I'll need to get used to it. She told him, under no circumstances understanding how much pain she was about to feel. Whenever you're ready. Okay, here it comes, he said. He grabbed 1010's hips and positioned himself, and then, in one swift stroke, rammed his entire nearly deep into her, breaking through her cervix and into her womb. Oh my Kami, she yelled, as his pelvis met hers, his chiseled stomach rested on top of hers, and they both embraced each other, as she wrapped her legs around him, almost instinctively. 1010 hips bucked as tears fell from her eyes. Her orgasm came down on her repeatedly, running a quake of pain and pleasure she never knew could happen. Nothing hurt as this had, and her bucking never died down for a time. You belong here. You belong here. You belong in me, she kept screaming over and over again. I'm yours, Naruto, I'm yours. It took some time until she was ready for more. Yet she kissed him, like a woman who had missed her lover for years and had finally found him. You feel so goddamn good, so tight, he said. They lay there, kissing, nibbling, caressing. Naruto deeply embedded inside her, never halting his thrusts. Years of their spars melted away as she felt his pulse through his. That was his heart beating, Naruto's heart beating, and she could feel it in her. She knew it so clear. She loved him, no matter the year or mission, she always loved him. He held her against his body, feeling her against his chest. She lay there surrounded by him, celebrating in the victory of their lust and their love. She could smell his sweat, sense his warmth, feel his huge rock-hard member inside her like it would be a permanent part of her body. Moments of their past flashed through her mind as she just lay in her Naruto's embrace, laughter, games, jokes, smiles, and so many spars. She felt him nuzzle her neck and gently kiss and suck her there. His back was so strong, his arms so muscular, unlike any. All Naruto's strength was now being employed in one goal and one goal alone, to please her body. She shivered as she thought of it, and her felt like it has just gushed more of her natural juices onto his massive, which seemed like it was stretching the lips and the walls of her cunt to their limits. She was losing all sense as he plowed into her with a blur. I love you, 1010, he said to her. More than you could ever know. I love you as a man. I love you with every inch of me. He moved down to her. These perfect supple orbs, the tight hard, and the pinkish areolas, large and prominent, framing her perfect body. And they were his. He kissed her left, and slowly drew her hard pink into his mouth and sucked, and sucked, and sucked. She felt a tickle she had never felt before, and her cunt muscles squeezed his tight. I love you too, she said back, with a smile, just enjoying the roughness of his hard stretching her and his loving of her. And I'm glad every inch of you loves me, because every inch of me belongs to you now. She was ready. Now me. Start slow, but work your way up in me. The way you would if you weren't worried about me getting hurt. I think you're as exactly designed for my. It is just perfect. Now you're 1010. Okay, honey, he said. He needed no more encouragement. He pulled back out of her, and slowly went back inside, slowly increasing the tempo of his strokes. She moaned as he increased his. He watched 1010's lips clutch his as he pulled out. She had lips that gripped like he had never seen. They held onto him like she used to hold on to him as they fought. In some ways, she was doing the same thing again. Spar with me. Spar with me, she used to say. Here she was, a woman, her vaginal lips clutching Naruto again saying, stay with me. And then, he saw it. His, soaked in Tenten's white, creamy juice. It was magic. Inches of his was soaked in butter from her. He began to thrust, harder, and harder as she yelled. She began to thrust back in rhythm with Naruto's pounding. Oh yes, Naruto. She began to yell. His thrusts were harsher, shoving his massive shaft deeper. You're so good, Naruto whispered back. And it was. It was the tightest, wettest, most perfect he had ever been in. They embraced again as Naruto pounded away at Tenten's soaking, dripping tunnel. His was covered in a creamy layer of her cunt juice and it dripped down to her. Their sweat mingled on each other's bodies. She licked his chest and shoulders while she kissed them, taking in the taste and feel of her big ninja. She moaned with the pleasure as he was pounding into her. She never imagined would feel so good. To have this thick a blur pounding into her, his fingers exploring her body, feeling him he was in the deepest recesses of her womb, pleasing her in a way nothing could ever describe. This was perfect, there was no other way to say it. She smiled as he slammed into her body. The thick lips of her absorbed the shock of his pelvis as it rammed into her. They gripped his abnormal large so tight as he pulled out it was almost as if her had a mind of its own, begging the man who now owned it never to leave. She would do anything for this man, but knew that the reverse was true. He would do anything for other. She had heard so many stories. How strange it was to figure out how to fit together body parts and positions correctly. Not for them. It must have been the secret behind why it felt so good, Tenten thought to herself. Their bodies fit together like puzzle pieces because it was like they were two separated halves of a whole joining back together. She bit her lower lip as Naruto thrust even deeper, touching nerves deep in her cunt made her entire body shake. He slammed her harder with full, deep strokes, violating her tight as she continued to beg for it. He licked her tits, taking in her sweat and her scent and her smell. Whether because she was just a perfect vixen from paradise, she tasted exquisite. As they with abandon, their bodies fitting together perfectly, he slammed her harder with full, deep strokes, thrusting into her tight, filling her womb causing a scream each time. Don't stop, she told him. They with abandon, their bodies fitting together perfectly. He went as vigorous and fast causing screams filling the air. Tenten yelled. His pelvis thrusting, with his, stimulating Tenten's in ways she never realized. Deep inside she started feeling a tightening. Naruto's body losing all sense with powerful thrusts of passion and need, the bed banging violently against the wall. The feelings filling her up. She moaned out with the particularly forceful thrust before she bit her lip to keep her silence. She moaned into his shoulder in return. For another hour he kept going, her being filled and an almost constant orgasm running through her. It was clear he was ready to take her someplace she had never been before as his pace impossibly increased causing her the biggest orgasm to come in full force drowning out all else. She felt her own orgasm rising. That intense feeling ran through her. She let out a loud scream, vision went white as she flickered around his swollen arousal. Toes curl as her world broke, quivering. Naruto felt his swell then after a few more hard thrusts he erupted, driving his deep into his lover's. A large blast of thick jizz filled her womb. She whimpered with a shaky breath as the tightness felt inside suddenly snapped, her entire body was on fire. She was quivering from head to toe, and inside, deep inside was Naruto shooting his hot thick searing cum. She was glowing. The hot burning cum filled her womb in a moment spilling onto the bed. For what seemed like forever they shared an orgasm, seed filling her. At that moment he could feel himself pulsing between her walls, and with a guttural groan, he fired more of his thick seed inside her and she remained against him, breathing hotly into the hollow of his neck. She came back to focus and realized that the energetic Naruto wasn't done, she could actually feel his pumping into her. Not knowing what else to do, she squeezed back with each twitch and was happy to get a response each time. There, buried under Naruto, his weight pinning her to the bed, she smiled. Enjoying Naruto's loving embrace, his still inside her, she knew then that he would never stop. Naruto awoke in a heat, nothing but sheer darkness around him, finding Ten draped over him, her arms wrapped snug around his chest. He smiled brightly as he relished her body enfolded around him. Settling back in the bed, considering to sleep for another hour. After some time Naruto's body shot up and realized his job. Crap, I'm going to be late again. Naruto leapt out as Ten kept her eyes closed. Naruto still grabbed his clothes in a flurry. In a flash the Uzumaki arrived at work and sat down at his office barely ready for the day. Just as he sat against his chair the door opened and an enormous group of leaders entered the room, all with gripes and annoyances. Naruto stood immediately and put on his best smile, knowing he was in for a long day. After a few hours of meetings and heated arguments he was back looking over a few treaties, mountains of papers surrounding him. Naruto sat with one hand rubbing his forehead as he reread countless papers and treaties. Shizune stood beside him, giving Naruto his many duties. A list that went on and on for the rest of the week, almost never ending. And that's it, she said with a smile as a list dropped to the floor. Alright, great Shizune. She smiled, leaning in to give him a kiss. Enjoying the kiss against her better judgment, she leaned back, breathing heavily. You know you have your work. She turned as Naruto loved watching her walk away, but before she left she stopped. Oh Naruto, I almost forgot, I was told by Temari to give you this. She handed Naruto a small note. She told you to give me this. Are you sure? He asked, perplexed. Yes. Of course. Naruto read the note to himself, being nothing less than baffled. Shizune, this must be wrong. Temari wants me to visit a love hotel. He asked. Yes, my love. She found him rereading the note with a questionable look, as if to find some deep meaning layered in the text. His eyes narrow, rereading the note. Naruto, you don't remember, do you? You shared some time with her as well. When she handed me the note she couldn't stop talking about you and the night you two had. She was so red and giddy. Naruto couldn't believe his ears and what Shizune was saying, knowing Temari to be always cold and distant. Temari. I had no idea. He only saw a woman who ignored him most of the time. Show up and be nice, she seems to get nervous around you. Alright Shizune, I will. Naruto spent the rest of the day doing his job. After a few more meetings Naruto left and headed to the location. Traveling deeper into depths of the red light district, seeping in the dark as he stopped before the hotel. Making his way through the hotel and stopped knocking on the door. The door opened in an instant, flying, and he found a madly blushing Temari unlike anything he had seen. She stood in her normal clothes, only difference was a massive blush etched on her face. You came, come sit. She grabbed his hand with intent, pulling him in quickly and sat down. I received your note, Temari. I didn't know how to ask you in person, it's a bit embarrassing being here and all, but I still can't believe the remarkable night we shared. I just couldn't wait another day. It was nothing but sure bliss for me, and I'm glad we did it. Yeah, I'm glad too. Naruto told, having no relocation, but flashes of her. She smirked as her eyes met his, her face a bright peach. You know, I never told you this, but after all you did for Gaara, saving him and my family, I couldn't stop thinking what you did to help me. You were so selfless every day, and cared about everyone but yourself. I admired you, and the way you held yourself. And to be honest, that first time I laid my eyes on you, I felt a warmth for you being the biggest knucklehead I've ever met. She smiled to herself as she remembered the loud knucklehead in her mind. You could be annoying when you were young, but still, you were always honest and emboldened a lovable regard. It was unlike a warmth I've ever felt. It surrounded me and seized hold of my heart, and after that day I knew I needed to tell you. She felt so confident, her face always on him. I didn't think you of all people would want me, but that night really said it all. That night all my feelings bubbled in my heart for you. And I'm so eager that you're here. Still so nervous for what we're about to do. Naruto smiled seeing her so anxious and unlike her cold self. It was a charming sight Naruto never witnessed and had to admit how gorgeous she was. You don't have to be nervous, Temari. You're a total badass and absolutely gorgeous. Naruto told with a gentle smile. Yeah, that's true. She told as she leaned forward, gradually taking his lips. The kiss was a surprise, but Naruto felt the passion. Their tongues splashed together with desire as Temari lost her self-control, needing to pull away. Just give me a minute, and take off your clothes, Naruto. She stood and left, entering the bathroom as Naruto undressed, pulling of his attire. Temari felt her stomach churn as her face gazed over the mirror. Coming back out, Temari wore nothing but a towel wrapped around her sensual body. She stopped as her eyes met his, still not believing the fat huge hanging between his legs. A very large veiny beast, with thick pulsating veins crawling around it stood. Naruto's a fearsome monster. She shook her head and drew closer. Dropping her towel, her body being on full display for him. The full bust showing the hint of hardened. The smooth belly and narrow waist, flaring out to wide hips atop long legs. And then she turned and he saw the plump roundness of her backside. He couldn't suppress a gasp of appreciation. Her sensual perky tits were beautiful with her slender stomach and thick thighs. With her chest freed, she ran her hands over the tremendous spheres. You better be ready, knucklehead. Without thought he leaned forward and pressed his lips to hers, then her exposed neck, as his hands pressed to her exposed body, roaming her stomach and shapely legs, passionately pressing his lips to her neck. Temari felt dizzy as a massive smile stretched across her face. She wanted the Uzumaki. Her head arched back, exposing more skin to him. Looking back, she gazed him, and before either knew, their lips were pressed together. So much less thought and planning. But a zealous kiss. Their mouths opened and their tongues splashed together in their mouths. Her lips are full and soft against his own, her breath sweet as he breathes her in. Her lips part, and her tongue darts out to taste him. It forces his own lips open and dives into his mouth, dueling and playing with his. Naruto's blood boils with lust. Never in his wildest dreams could he have imagined this moment, and yet now he is here with Temari. It couldn't feel more natural. His arms wrap around her, pulling her close, while her own arms enfold him, her hands coming to rest on the back of his head and threading through his feathery hair. Naruto's strong hands glide along her back, down to her narrow waist. On instinct he reaches beneath to trace the contour of her buttocks, enjoying their curvature and solidity and flexibility. Naruto's hands began to stoke against her thighs as her hand worked his, all the while their lips to the other. Temari was at a loss of words. She desperately wanted this. My Hokage, she whispered, in between kissing him again, passionately thinking of all the times she thought of Naruto. She felt his hands roaming all over her body, the sensitivity of him tweaking her. Pinching them with his fingers, then massaging her and her legs. She felt his fingers all over her at once. At the same time, he felt her hands moving over his body, caressing his skin and squeezing his rough muscles and six-pack. They breathed heavily, almost panting with their uncontrolled zeal. Naruto cupped her face with his hand and brushed his lips against hers before gently the bottom lip. The two blondes kept their bodies together. He locked his mouth with hers as she let out an urgent moan. That feeling twisting up her skin, so enraging. Their tongues entwined. They knew that they needed the other's touch. This was the answer to their arching desire. After a few moments, she found herself losing control, something she always had managed over, something no man had caused, yet Naruto did in a delightful way. Grinding her against his leg, she could feel his hard massive pressing into her. She reached down between their bodies and felt her hand grip his huge shaft. He moved his own hand over, gently jerking his fingers in her. She moaned, breathing his name heavily and enjoying the skillful use of his fingers. He captured her lips again and continued the kiss, their mouths rarely separating. Their bodies moving in unison, and it felt lovely. After several minutes of this rocking kiss, his fingers slipped to her. She gave a little yelp. Cooing with him, she kept grinding against his hand. She felt his finger enter her twat as he did skillfully. It felt intense, a little bit painful, but lovely. Her hand was still wrapped around his hard shaft, and suddenly, she was struck by an idea. She broke their kiss. Naruto, come lay down with me. He listened and laid down on the bed. She climbed up and crouched down over his face, with her hovering over his face, her knees at the side of each cheek. Naruto laid there and gazed up at the lovely view before him, with a smile. She lowered herself slowly until she settled herself on her knees against his chest. She edged her face closer to his 15-inch shaft. Before she had a chance to lean forward and give him a blowjob, Naruto delved deep. Wait, Naruto. His hands grasped her lower half, muffling his face with her flesh, covering all of him with her. Grabbing her thighs and pulling her legs apart towards him, muffling his voice and face, a perfect position for him. Naruto stuffed his face deep. Without a word, he began kissing up her skin with soft caresses, moving closer to her puffy nether regions, which in turn was directing more and more pleasure through her body, unlike that of anything she knew. You're quite the wicked Hokage, aren't you? A devious side no one identifies. She told to the pleasant Hokage. Only him nearing her twat. She then felt his tongue gradually glide up and down her searing, sopping wet slit. An intense shock and a chill ran down her spine as an intense moan sounded. Enjoying her moans, he continued kissing her across her thighs, in middle of which he found her cherry, this one even sweeter. He gently flicked her with his tongue, forcing her to squirm, as her body shook from head to toe. Oh, right there, that spot, Naruto. Naruto flicked it again. Her breathing was shallow and fast. Her heart was beating as if it was about to explode, and she felt intense pleasure running through her body from the young knucklehead she would always remember. She wanted more, and she was about to receive what she craved. He pressed against her, following the lines of her labia, then tickling the smaller lips inside and finally pushing his tongue as far as he would go. Temari's powerful aroma and taste was overwhelming. Temari's extreme moans did not halt. He continued to burrow his face into her crotch, tongue eagerly lapping at the delicious nectar. Reaching around her leg, he placed his thumb onto her and started rubbing it in fast circular motions, gentle but passionate. The feeling stunning through her was sure bliss, the feelings eloping her body, causing an explosion she dare never felt. Yes. Please don't stop, Naruto. His tongue is soon buried deep in her, licking, cleaning, and eating her out rapidly. She let out a surprised wail. Her body fell forward, hands resting on his abs, squeezing him. Feeling a bit embarrassed knowing she's soaking with her juices. The woman was enjoying the Hokage eagerly, bringing in no time to climax. Her Hokage's skilled tongue caused a delight spike her spine. He had her in a grip of steel as Temari felt ecstasy. The once calm Hokage was now a beast untamed. She gave a scream of ecstasy as his tongue licked along her dripping slit and the petals of her love flower, cleaning up all the mess her juices were making. She gave a sharp cry and shivered on top of him when his tongue speared her depths, getting so deep into her wet hole. That was a sensation which would stay with her forever, and she would not let it go to waste. "Oh shit, my Hokage," she muttered, her back arched. The Hokage's tongue is magic, circling her, plunging deep, and soon she forgot all her past. And before she knew it, the orgasm descended. The thoughts that remained was her husband to be and rode his exploring tongue. She felt such trance running down her body and heighten her senses. Screaming out the orgasm was intoxicating. The pumping urge ran through her more as her body shook. All became a flash of bright lights as she stared into the infinite, her body on a high. After a full minute she felt herself come back. While this occurred, her eyes found his gigantic standing out straight, throbbing and waiting. In front of her his hard, thick 15-inch. The heavy, thick, male musk that made her horny cunt twitch in anticipation, only made her want to try out the shaft even more. The dripped with sweat, the smell nearly overpowering the stench of anything else. She can't resist it. Leaning forward, she rested herself on top of him, her torso laying flat on his lower half, creating a 69. With her face against his shaft, first she gently grabbed hold of his thick throbbing member, feeling the hotness burn Tamari. With a smile she gently licked along his shaft from base to head, hearing the sound of his groan from her muffled cunt. Tamari then went to work on Naruto's balls, burying her nose into the sweltering cum sacs while her hand wrapped around the throbbing, jerking it while she licked and sucked on one of the testes, trying to bring one in her mouth to roll as much around in her cheek, slurping and gurgling at the fat grapefruit-sized sack, gathering a few strains of sweat around her panted lips. Tamari hummed as she left bright pink stains of her lipstick on the right sack with playful kisses. She purred at the heavy taste of sweat that tingled on her tongue. Hearing a gleeful groan from her Hokage, Tamari trailed her tongue up. Naruto groaned in elation as she sucked. "Don't stop," he said before stuffing his face back into her twat. Once Tamari was ready, she parted her lips fully and slid the engorged head of his huge into her mouth. Her tight lips stretched to a massive ring and she tried to swallow him as deep as possible, relishing his taste. Gauging, Tamari coughed in agony around his fat and was rewarded by his groan and an involuntary rise of his hips. She proceeded with several swirls of her tongue as she began to try to bob her head up and down, her warm, moist mouth soaking Naruto's throbbing with saliva. The seal between her mouth and Naruto's giant tool was completely airtight. Saliva sloppily rolled from his shaft, down to his balls as she tickled his head with her tongue. The girl tried again, bobbing her head slowly to take the hungry, massive in her mouth. Every move of her head gained her more and more of Naruto's, her lipstick marking just how little she had gone. Tamari hummed as she titled her head to let the poke out of her cheek, spurling around the meat pole with her tongue before guzzling it down in her throat, gagging trying to swallow it. Showing little skill, Tamari sucked with effort, flicking his muscle to slather the while she tightened her throat, squeezing her neck to choke the shaft in her throat as she milked The Hokage groaned as the amazing Sand Kunoichi drew her lips back, dragging her mouth slowly off the shaft to its head. Their bodies writhed together, her mashed against his stomach and her legs sat on either side of his head. Naruto wanted only to bring her to an orgasm, while Tamari wanted the same. His tongue never stops its ministrations of her, as she gradually pushed inch after massive inch down her cavity, having as much trouble as the most challenging mission. She tried to take all inches of the thickness. Unable to swallow him, she worked the much she could. The two slurped the other, working in tandem with the other. Their powerful muffled voices and moans filled the air as the two worked the other to orgasm. Their gags and constant moans and groans never came to halt, nothing but pure bliss. She tried to travel down the bulk of the shaft. She groaned around Naruto's as she did her best to slide more of his length down her throat. Naruto's fat shaft made it difficult to plunge down the way she wanted. She could barely get halfway down before she started to choke. Taking her mouth off the shaft, Tamari glared at how far the stain of lipstick went. She had done almost nothing for her love. In sheer stubbornness, Tamari started to roughly coat the Uzumaki's dong in her spit. Lick under, over and around the shaft roughly, she made sure to coat everything from his thick veins to his massive head. The shaft felt like an endless mountain. No matter how much Tamari licked and spat, she still felt she wasn't even close to getting the whole thing wet. So she went back to trying to suck down his now slick member. And to her joy, Tamari found herself going deeper past her previous mark. The once stubborn girl started sucking harder at that point. Bobbing her head, her lips straining form being so outstretched, she sucked and suckled at the bitch breaking before her. After trying a few more times, she managed to suppress her gag reflex and finally took 10 inches into her mouth. His pressed into the back of her throat, she could feel it at the very back of her esophagus, feeling full. With a massive heavy, she gagged while her throat bulged out in the shape of the. Tamari heaved and retched, yet her motions on his got faster. Pumping her hand at the same speed as her bobbing head. Gasping and retching as she deep-throated the cunt, breaking, the substantial filling her to the brim. Naruto felt ecstasy, her tight mouth wrapped so tightly around him, ping of ecstasy running through him. The groans from his muffled mouth sounded again and again to her delight. In no time, the sounds of wet sucking and filled the room. For a moment she began to find a rhythm in sucking his. Tamari taking him in her mouth, cleaning him. He began rolling his hips to meet her lips as she took no time. She worked a little faster now, sliding her lips from the very head of his all the way to 10 inches, steadily increasing her pace. She didn't realize just how much he was enjoying himself. Tears started to form around Tamari's eyes, and her face became red, but she did not relent. For what seemed like forever, she her own throat with the massive. She gagged loudly and coughed all over Naruto's fat prick as she worked it. The muffled sounds could be heard, but more than anything she felt the vibration moving through his throbbing pole. Streams of saliva dripping down to the base of his as Tamari tried devouring inch after inch with precision in her oral talents. Tamari, you must really love this, huh? The man groaned openly this time. To her surprise, he began to lick her all over with a blur. With him enthusiastically licking her, she began to suck him in earnest. She gulped as much of him into her mouth as she could. She felt herself losing control, grinding herself on his face with vigor. The stars begin to rise in her vision and she starts to shake. These were feelings never awoken, feelings that broke her and brought her to a bliss unknown. His arms wrapped around her trembling hips and held her tight to his face. She had to release his from her mouth so she could breathe. Taking her by surprise, he bites down gently on her. It sends her over the edge once more. She was blissfully overwhelmed. If most orgasms began with frenetic movements and howls of pleasure, this one was exactly the opposite. Tamari's cries stopped suddenly and she froze under Naruto's mouth. Her body slowly arching upwards until she spasmed and Tamari shouted for the world to hear. A very warm splash of thick, sticky spunk sprayed across his tongue. He eagerly swallowed it. As much as this moment had been a release, it was an extreme explosion for Tamari. Holding on as long as she could before being thrown off from the world she knew. She shook with pleasure from her head to her toes. As he pushed hard, opening his mouth wide. The taste of her flooded his mouth as he drank in Temari's juices. She came all over his face and that seemed to drive him wild. This only heightens her pleasure as he roughly eats her out. Her breathing fast and glowed in the embers of her climax. Her orgasm seems to last forever as her Uzumaki lapped her down his throat. Temari shocked was an understatement. Eventually she was panting and exhausted. A few moments later, a large grin spread on her face. Temari was regaining control of herself. Her head stared up, finding his still straining for attention. She finally came down from her orgasm. Still she desired to give him an orgasm and took his massive shaft once again, bobbing her head. She choked a little, coating his shaft. But she continued to let her mouth and her throat play with his more rapid, this time with a mission. The effeminate girl lost herself in pleasing the powerful beast. Moaning as she practically worshipped the Uzumaki's mighty spear. She worked Naruto's at a blistering pace. The once cold woman dove onto the pole with her mouth with no regard for grace or finesse. Her goal was to shove as much as possible down her throat. Naruto grunted as his head hit the back of her warm oral cavern, and her responsive gag shook him. Temari took the challenge of the bulging, and assaulted it with her gullet. Her warm mouth retreated quicker up the length of his shaft at his engorged head. She always held herself in such high esteem, yet this act of lust was driving her mad. She teased his with her tongue, swirling her tongue all the while she brought her hands to stoke the base with a skin-tight seal. She worked her way back down his, sucking hard. Her pace was nothing less than swift. The pleasure shot through Naruto like a rocket. After an hour of her worshipping his massive shaft, she felt his go rigid and build. Anticipating his release with excitement. Naruto sensed it coming until he was brought over the edge. She engulfed his concrete and allowed it to push into the depths of her throat. Its vastness was hard to contain to ensure she kept it encased. Her throat moving all the way to 12 inches until he grew rigid. The first shot swiftly filled Temari's mouth and then some with thick delicious jizz. Blasting out her nose and blowing up her cheeks while she tried to swallow, out desperation, as much as she could of the spasming prick's discharge. Knowing she wouldn't be able to take the second shot, Temari removed her mouth from Naruto's and let the rest lather her face in white globs. Big, gelatinous blasts of spunk erupted from the mighty and covered the woman's whole face. One shot was enough to drench her, yet he never stopped. Heavy glops of jizz dripped and stained her. And fizzed out from his lips. Yet Naruto never seemed to stop coming. The next burst of cum shot directly into her, splashing down, running down her throat. Swallowing it down, the next blast caught her off guard. Another came and another, coating her face as before she was ready. Another searing blast came after burning her. Pushing on, the explosions ran down her face as she thought he would not stop, until the following minute and last load was down and her body rested. Leaning back, the two laid basking in their much-needed orgasm. Naruto laid there, sweat of her running on him with her soft on his skin. Temari looked over. We cannot waste this time together before our marriage. I agree, we cannot waste any more time. Naruto smiled and picked up the sand ninja, bridal style. Temari laughed as she was carried over to the bed and gently laid down upon the soft silk. Gazing over the sand ninja, Naruto smiled. You're beautiful, Temari. She blushed with a cheeky grin. Shut up, but thank you. Throwing her clothes in the corner, he brought his hands up, wrapping his palms on her tits and tweaked her hard. It was strange to her how the pain could be so stimulating and erotic. Her was literally sopping cum all over his, the anticipation too much to bear. She was so close to her Uzumaki, to her desire. His big was hot and hard against her. She felt his hands roaming all over her body, the sensitivity tweaking her. Pinching them with his fingers, then massaging her bottom and her legs. The sensations filling her with complete drowning ecstasy. She felt his fingers all over her at once. At the same time, her hands moved all over his body, caressing his skin and squeezing his rough muscles and six-pack. They breathed heavily, almost panting with their uncontrolled zeal. Naruto cupped her face with his other hand and brushed his lips against hers before gently the bottom. He locked his mouth to hers, feeling her press back with an urgent moan. That feeling twisting up her skin, so enraging. Their tongues entwined. They knew that they needed the other's touch. And this was the answer to their arching desire. Leaning forward to kiss him some more, she rolled her hips around him and flipped him over on his back, enjoying the sensation of his thick against her hot boxand. When she felt the head of his catch in her folds, her eyes widened a bit in surprise. The heat and size of him was searing. Oh, she wondered. She leaned up and hovered above his. The massive monster looked impossible to conquer, but Tamari took the challenge. The heat from his tantalizing. Without any need of words, she pressed down and felt herself opening up much too wide. The sheer huge size of her knuckleheads was too much as the pain coursed up within her. Her mouth opened in ecstasy and surprise. Clapping a hand over her mouth to stifle the mews she was beginning to utter, she continued pressing down. The pain was unlike anything as she was stretched wide. This was like nothing she had ever experienced. It wasn't like the thoughts, which was the closest thing she had to compare it to. This was amazing. Her hips began to shake as the pain was immense, yet she continued her descent. He wasn't even halfway in and she already felt full. Almost as if she was being split in two. How could she possibly take any more of him inside? She didn't know. Naruto groaned as Temari's tight wrapped around him. He laid there watching as she moaned and wailed. It did hurt, but biting her lips she pressed on. Plunging inside her as pain struck her. Here she knew she would never be alone again, her Uzumaki beside her. Her moans quickly resounded throughout the room as his stretched her twitching slit. Her was burning and drenched as his pushed deep. Naruto groaned as her twat squeezed him. She smoothly moved her hips up and down, plugging her wet and tight box with his inches that go in with effort. He smiled as she him, seeing her already jolting forward when she pushes his fat into her snatch, watching the sight. Her tits shook pleasantly from the motion her curvaceous body was doing as she further showed that raised level of lust by beginning to bang herself on the that's already driving deep into her. He watched, seeing her in pain. If there is any discomfort, Tamari. No, it's okay. It doesn't hurt, she lied. Seeing the pain, he kept still, letting her become acquainted with his manhood. Her spasmed and tightened up with each push onto him. Moaning, she tried desperately to retain some dignity. With several bounces and difficulty, each spasm passed more and allowed her to seize even more. With each inch she stifled a moan and yell. She couldn't help herself hearing his groan. She wanted him to feel better and unlike anything he had ever experienced and would ever. She repeated the motion over and over, driving deep. The more she took, the louder and raspier the grunts escaped her throat. She felt the intense feeling inside her as a scream sounded from her throat. Naruto watched as the moon illuminated the room and the beautiful woman rode him from above. Without giving her time, she felt his shaft thrust deep inside her, throwing her head back, letting out a scream. Oh shit. She naughtily moaned out with another lusty look as the sound of skin meeting skin started to sound it out around the room as her nicely juicy backside connects with his muscular body, ensuring she's getting filled up completely with his magnificent big size to give her the kind of fierce she's never had. He grunts as he kept a firm hold of her waist, staring down to watch his vanish right up into her tight and damp snatch before soon reappearing as he pulled a few inches out and she jolted forward and away from him, but soon the two quickly meet up when he drove into her snatch as she rammed herself with force and desire to make them groan out. Focusing on the welcome invader inside her tight petite body, her spasmed several more times, each time relaxing, loosening up a bit more, as she became acclimated to its presence. After much difficulty, she managed 10 inches pressing to her womb. That wasn't her goal, and she knew she could take all of him. A matter of pain stood in the way, yet she knew Aiken welcomed it. With one final plunge, she took him, his punching into her womb, filling her to the brim. She lost her breath, her back arching. Oh, after much struggle, somehow she managed all inches. She felt his hips on her pelvis and his pubic hairs tickling her shaved mound. She knew she was bottomed out. Her hands pressed to the bed as she let out a muffled wail. It felt as if her was reformed and Naruto punched through her. She needed a long moment to regain herself and the relief. Seeing it, wasn't believing, and not being able to believe she conquered all inches. After some time, it felt better than anything she could have ever imagined. And this is just step one. Her mind teased. She began moving slowly, in part because she wasn't sure what to do and partly because on some level she wanted to feel him. Back and forth she rocked her hips, feeling him move ever so slightly within. Leaning onward gave her a better angle as she worked up to longer and longer strokes. Once she found the limit of her motions, she started testing. She would thrust down on him hard, roll her hips around feeling his twirling inside her, then rocked her hips forward and back while clenching her thigh muscles, effectively milking his with her. Rocking back and forth on his some more, she knew her own orgasm was fast approaching. Soon, a grunting sounded. Looking down, she saw Naruto's eyes on her. He was being ridden. He watched Temari's firm as she was grinding on his. Reaching up, he wrapped an arm around his lover and buried his mouth in her, licking, kissing and sucking. Nibbling lightly on one of her, she gave a small squeal of surprise before he rolled her over to give her the she deserved. He sought to drown in her. He loved her so. Naruto dived into her. He surprised her a bit when he lightly bit her. Her squeal in response was uncontrollable. He used that moment of surprise to wrest control from her, and she was okay with that. He was so much stronger than she realized, picking her up with ease and flipped her over. Spreading her legs, Naruto slipped in, driving his into the hilt, momentarily taking her breath away. Body arched, head flew back as her spasmed with her orgasm coming at full force. Her stretched wide. She wrapped her hands on her mouth with muffled screams. The shocks that tore through her was mind-opening as her hips spasmed for a time. The orgasm like nothing she knew, her entire body pulsing. Until she laid there like a sloth. "You're deep inside me," she stated in a single breath, her cheeks flushed. She was breathing heavy now, the feeling showing more intense. She reached forward, kissing him all the while their bodies moved in unison. He began to move his hips faster, pushing harder inside her. She felt the pulsing passion. It was mixed with wonderful kind of pleasure. As he thirsted, he leaned forward, kissing her as each thrust caused her to shudder. His tongue felt hot and soft against her. His grunts and her wails filled the room as he pumped her with slow strokes. Atop of her, plunging his deep inside her, his waist against her. Her legs splayed open for him, her toes curling and uncurling as he pumped with slow, hard rhythmic thrusts, plowing her sensual and deep. Every thrust a moan escaped her lips and he couldn't take it any longer. She was beautiful. Using a swift and nicely forceful motion with which to pound away into her box that's still gripping his member as tightly as she was when he first entered her. Her slickness that now covers his rod only making the task even more smoother for him to continue driving that long pole straight into her twat. "It feels so good. Don't halt," she purred, her voice lingering with lust. Naruto was in total control and Temari knew it with every hard driving thrust. She also knew from his increased pace, he wasn't close to an end. The smells and sounds causing that lust to explode. Groaning into her ear, he squeezed her left and encouraged her to look at him over her shoulder, licking at her mouth as he began to work his arousal inside her. He drove his in and out of her box with the kind of pace and force that felt perfect to her, the infamously beauty showing she can handle as well as spit out innuendos as she continues to moan out with every in and out thrust she took from the equally groaning out in pleasure hunk who's taking her like this. Naruto. She breathed hotly, every fiber of being burning with desire. Sweat no running down her body, her hair a mess as the two were filled with passion. He slammed his up to the hilt into the stunning sand ninja to make her moan in shameless delight on his, those cries continuing as he drove himself in and out of her dripping snatch, already putting more than enough force behind his motion to make her bounce on his, in turn making those beautiful bigs shake with every thrust. Sandwiched between his attractive and hunky body, she can only remain in place held above the floor to take the best she'd had, and loved every moment of it as she groaned away and keeps a firm hold. Oh, don't stop. The sand ninja begs between loud moans, her eyes becoming glazed over from the intense pleasure she's feeling, the signs of a long-needed high building up inside of her frame, her makeup starting to run from the sweat this pounding is making her do, but that's far from her mind now as she jolts on the pistoning rod, stuffing her love tunnel full and driving her so lustfully wild like this. She suddenly moaned out. Exclamation mark. Big makin' me cum. She said as she continued to take his thrusts as he goes in balls deep into her wet but still craving more hole. Giving her a pumping to never forget the pleasure he's delivering, and her own desire has all been enhanced by the handsome man her has been utilizing. That's it, Tamari, he yelled. Take it. Naruto grunts, the sweat dripping off his rugged facial features as he hammered away into the finest piece of. He focused on driving her with thrust after hard, balls deep thrust that made those tits jiggle and keeps her groaning out to give her stunning body the kind of action she and her loving ways deserve. Yeah, yes, loudly and shameless, she came hard all over the ramming deep of this Uzumaki as he kept her held up and, still able to ram that lengthy sharply in and out of her slot even as she tightens around him and her fluids start gushing out over his member. Ushi it. She groaned out as her eyes have rolled into the back of her head, her mouth hanging open as an orgasm the likes of which she's clearly never dreamed possible flowed through her body to make her shiver in delight even as she still jolts and bounced when he stiffly sent his up deep into that completely now soaking wet hole. By the time she finally came back down, it's only his grip on her that kept her up as her legs and arms slumped from off of him as she gasped for air with a lazy but extremely satisfied and smile on her pretty but makeup-ruined face. Naruto relinquished his restraint and began to pound into her with desperate, needy thrusts, the bed beginning to rattle as one of his hands clutched at the edge of the bedpost. Her twat stretched beyond the limit as her body shook. He pushed his hand down between them, encouraging her into his powerful thrusts. Tamari didn't know how she could keep quiet with Naruto hammering into her like that. She dug her nails into his back. The intense sensation taking hold the tips of her fingers down to her toes. Her womb being filled. Tamari hissed, not knowing how much she could take. She wasn't entirely sure where this version of Naruto would come from in the night, but she 100% approved every instant. Naruto. She repeated as his thrusts were quick and filled with power into the sand ninja leaning down kissing her neck. She wrapped her hands around his back, her nails racking at him as her legs wrapped around his waist keeping him tight to her. She marveled at his stamina as he began to cover her with kisses. She coed underneath him. The visual of the Uzumaki deep inside her as he her so deep, she couldn't tear her eyes from him. He leaned down wrapping his lips around her hard as she shook all over. Her hands squeezed the bed as his thrusts were quick, their minds together drawn blank, and only their pleasure provided were the only things discernible. She could feel her body moving to that same delectable crescendo she experienced before. He groaned as he was giving her enticing pleasure. It came and even more intensified as her vision became obscured. Temari's nails stabbed at his skin and Naruto hissed, biting back a soft groan as he slammed inside her, the hot smacking sounding against his lap. Her heat wrapped snugly around his, milking and massaging him as he drove strongly into her slick heat. When she looked at him, he at her bottom lip, wanting to elicit a reaction. "You feel so good, Temari," he whispered. Licking at her mouth, he pulled her in for a searing kiss, glossing his tongue over hers as he devoured her muffled moans. Fumbling for her hands against the bed, Naruto glanced and bit down on her lip. His touch sliding to her waist before he began to force her back into his thrusts. Temari arched and gasped, and then her head tossed. The inside her stretching her. Naruto trailed a series of warm, open-mouthed kisses along her neck. She moaned, raising her hand, pressing her fingers into his hair. Relishing this, loving this. Every thrust, every push caused her to feel ecstasy. He remained buried deep inside her, enjoying the aftershocks of her warmth contracting around him. Yes. Temari swore. Holding tightly to the bed, she panted and gazed at Naruto's equally disheveled appearance. Her body covered in sweat. "It's like you become someone completely different in the steamy hot." Naruto's much too large inside her as he thrusted repeatedly into Temari's warm wet. She wanted his cum, she wanted to feel it inside her, wanted to experience the receiving end of his passion. More than anything though, she wanted to know what it felt like to give him that kind of pleasure and love. She wrapped her arms around the back of his head and drew in for a kiss. Once she saw his eyes drift to hers, their lips fused. Tightening her thighs around his middle as their kiss began to die off, she pulled his head to her shoulder in a loving embrace. "Don't ever stop," Temari whispered. His pelvis thrusting, along with his filling her, was stimulating Temari's in ways she never seen. Deep inside she started feeling a tightening. Naruto's body a blur, losing all sense with powerful thrusts of passion and need. "Ah, ah," she burst out with the particularly forceful thrust before she bit her lip to keep her silence. At the same time, the slapping sound of his hips on her combined with the wet sloppy sounds of his working her. She moaned into his shoulder in return. It was clear he was ready to take her someplace she had never been before as his pace impossibly increased. Practically in tears from holding back her screams, she sunk her teeth into his shoulder as she felt her own orgasm rising. That intense feeling ran through her. She let out a loud moan, vision went white and she flickered around his swollen arousal. Toes curl as her world broke, quivering. He could feel himself pulsing between her walls, and with a guttural groan, he emptied his seed inside her and remained against her back, panting hotly into the hollow of her neck. Naruto erupted, driving his deep into his lover's. A loud groan and a hard thrust his swelled, she knew he was coming. She whimpered with a shaky breath as the tightness she felt inside suddenly snapped. Her entire body was on fire, she was quivering from head to toe, and inside, deep inside was Naruto shooting his hot searing cum. She was glowing. The hot burning cum filled her womb in a moment, spilling out of her for a time. For what seemed forever they shared an orgasm, seed filling her. Temari had an epiphany in those moments as Naruto finished pumping her full of cum. She came back to focus and realized that the energetic knucklehead wasn't done, she could actually feel his pumping into her. Not knowing what else to do, she squeezed back with each twitch and was happy to get a response each time. Her eyes widen as to her surprise he's producing more jizz. Her tits get more than ample covering along with his cum filling up her cleavage and staining his own. There, buried under her uzumaki, his weight pinning her to the bed. She smiled. Enjoying Naruto's loving embrace, his still inside her, she wanted this moment to last forever. Locking her legs around his, she held him in that full-body hug. She couldn't help but caress the hair on the back of his head. "I always wanted you," she whispered in his ear. "I wanted you too," he murmured in response, his beginning to slip out of her cum-filled. The two laid there in the bliss of their in love.